Yes, guys, welcome to Chasing Green Arrows. It's Friday, and it's a slightly special episode today. We're joined by regular co-host. Well, very different. I mean, we're joined by regular co-host Mr. Dean Jones, but I'm in a different place with a different guy. So, welcome to the show, Ian Irving. How you doing?
With a different guy. It's like you're cheating on me.
Different guy every Friday, is it? How are you, Ian?
I'm really good, thank you, mate. Yeah, we've done the show together here at Stockley Park earlier on. Focused my mind a little bit more on the free hit options for the weekend. So, yeah, it's good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Ian's been asking me questions all morning on the show, which will be out on the official FPL digital platforms in the next hour, I would imagine. So you can watch that after this show. But we're going to be chatting an hour, answering your questions, showing our teams. 3 very different free hit drafts there, which you'll be pleased to hear. And even if you're not on free hit, there is a poll in the chat. Do get voting. This will be of use because if you're not on free hit, you need to think about the sort of players you might want to bring in to help cover you. So, for example, a Maddison or a Tony or whatever. Dean, how's your morning been, mate? You've been reacting, I guess, to a lot of the non-FPL stuff, but the English teams in Europe, right?
Yeah, just was doing a podcast a second ago and did live reaction to the Champions League draw. I mean, poor old Arsenal, eh? I mean, blimey, if you want to test yourself at the highest level, but you want a bit of luck along the way, and they've been drawn to play Bayern Munich, and then they get Real Madrid or Man City in the round after that. So that's extremely difficult. But look, this is all about tests. And end of the day, Arsenal Champions League season, I just tweeted this, really reminds me of where they were at in the Premier League last season. It was all too soon, and it was like a bonus. Like, you know, last season they were in the title race, but they weren't really ready for that. They were just overachieving, but they've learned from that. And this season they've been able to build on it. And then this season in Champions League, most people probably thought the quarterfinal was the max they would get to anyway, but they've got there, and now they've got Bayern Munich. That is a winnable game, actually. Arsenal have been a better team than Bayern Munich this season. And then they've got Real Madrid or Man City. It doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't matter right now for Arsenal. No one expects them to win the Champions League this season. So I think just make the most of the opportunity. Like, it's kind of a free hit season now for Arsenal in terms of going for these 2 competitions. So I think fair play to them. I'm going to go through some of the comments, most of them about your bromance, to be honest. They obviously everybody's noticing you're sitting very well, very close to each other today. Ian, what is your overall rank? I'm actually interested in that because the last time you came on, mate, you weren't actually having a a good season. I think that might have turned around.
You had a few greens there.
That was an understatement. Yeah, I'll just have a quick look and give you a definite rank. 257,000 now. So,
mate, what a turnaround!
Yeah, I mean, just to spell it out, how bad I was doing. As recently as Gameweek, 13 was when I started my climb. I was 3.2 million in Gameweek 13. And to be honest, I've tread water for quite a while. So the last 5 or 6 game weeks have been in and around 300,000, really. Mm-hmm. And I thought this week with captaining Solanke and stuff like that, I thought that I might actually end up going up a little bit. And I was actually doing all right until the comeback for Bournemouth. That Zabani goal was awful for me, really.
Right.
Solanke goal less so. That was good news because he was captain. But the Zabani goal was a disaster for me.
Yeah,
did you have it?
Yeah, I also got lucky with the week before. I bought him in, knowing there was a double game week coming, and he got 6 points. So for me, I've had a 6 and an 8. I'm delighted with Zabani, and he'll probably be in my team in 30-31. Again, remember those that are free hitting this week probably aren't wildcard in for a few weeks. Like, I'm looking to wildcard later in 35. Although Dean, I know you're looking at maybe a wildcard slightly sooner. If you're not this week, you're buying Spurs players probably, and the good thing about that is Spurs have Luton next week. So again, in game week 30, I think the non-free hit 29ers might have a slight advantage that they'll be stacked up on good players.
Yeah, although for me, the main reason in the end I ended up deciding that I was going to free hit this week wasn't necessarily to attack this week. It was actually just to protect my team, because I didn't want to go into 29 ripping up what's been a pretty good formula, like I've said, with chasing the Green Arrows, ironically, over the last few weeks. Name that. So I didn't want to rip it all up. So I thought, well, actually, I don't want to bring in Ivan Toney and then have to take him back out again. I don't want to target people like Leon Bailey, who I don't necessarily want, longer term. Even James Maddison, how much do I really want to be doubled up on the Spurs midfield? Game week 30 against Luton, yes. but beyond that, perhaps not. So in the end, actually, the thing that sold it for me, free hitting, was the fact that I can come back to this team next week, and bringing in, a few punts this week wouldn't be damaging longer term, and I can delay the wild card then to like 34 maybe, or to line up for 34. So that was my main reason for free hitting this week. And if people are still unsure about what to do, just because of what your picture looks like this week shouldn't be the only reason to consider what your players this week. Have a look how you are going to be fixed post game week 29 if you've not yet decided.
Yeah, I look forward to going through those 8 teams. We'll do a little preview of all the 4 games and give predictions in the 4 as well, because this is a game week where I think many of us will look at it and go, where are the clean sheet points coming from? Maybe that's too hard to predict. You just need to be focused on the attacking players.
Just worry about where the points are coming from.
Yeah, it's always a good.
Do you know what I mean? Even the defenders, you're picking attacking defenders, aren't you? Because they're not keeping clean sheets, but they might get an assist here or there. So we'll get into that, won't we?
I've noticed in the chat, speaking of upside players, Lungani, who's one of our chasers, our regulars, this time last week, I think he told me and Dean that he was looking at buying Unai, and he said, "I'm gonna do it." And
who did you say?
I can't even pronounce his name.
He's made up a player.
I think I said, okay, there's differentials and there's him. What are you doing, Lungani? And fair play, because points in both matches. Like, I don't know what his total was, but it was a big return. So yeah, love that outside the box thinking. Who's your tip this week, Lungani? Do let us know. And everyone in the chat, let us know your differential shouts this week. Dean, I've got one for you off the bat. We'll talk a little bit about differentials before we go into the players everyone's talking about. One guy I've tipped this week is Willian. As a Fulham fan, do you think he starts? Because I know it's Willian or Wilson this week likely to start. If Willian starts, he's got a good record against Spurs. He's arguably your best wide attacker of the season. And at Craven Cottage, Fulham seem to always score. Like, I'm backing them to score, especially if Van der Ven's out.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Willian is still in our top 3 players in this team. Like, he might be pushing 40 at this stage. It doesn't matter. Like, it's funny, I saw all the Fulham players have been asked throughout the season to like talk about teammates. Every time people talk about Willian, they're like, he is one of the best players I've ever played with. And that's at this stage of his career. Tom Kearney was talking about him and said, I wish I could have played with this guy 5-6 years ago to see how good he was, because he is absolutely ridiculous. If he's fit, mate, there's absolutely no doubt that he will start this game. I don't know 100% that he will, but given that he got a decent run out last time around and he's had a week since then to recover, I would be surprised. Harry Wilson doesn't fill me with confidence. He's been up and down this season. Actually, the last month he has been decent, but in his last outing, missed a really good chance actually against Wolves. I don't know if you saw the one that he stuck wide. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Willian comes in. And from a Fulham perspective of trying to win this game, he's kind of got to. He's going to be definitely our best asset. Alex Iwobi is brilliant. Willian is brilliant. And actually, you talk about differentials and perhaps defenders that can be more attack-minded and not worry about the fact of conceding. I have had half a thought to get Anthony Robinson in. That's definitely one of the consider. If I haven't got any Fulham players in my current free hit team, but I think I will bring in at least one just to cover myself for that fixture a bit more evenly. Because at the moment I'm a Fulham fan going to the game with 3 Spurs players in my team. I want to give myself some hope going into that game.
Around you, Dean, you might be getting chucked out before half time by the home crowd, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Willian, Iwobi, Robinson, all good assets. I would tread carefully.
What about the striker?
Yeah, Mr. Exclusive.
Just tell us about that, because Ian asked me in the ad break of the show today. I said, I think Dean pretty much broke the news. Like, your tweet was the first public-facing comment I had seen on the idea of Muniz needs to start. Oh, if Broja, no, give us the headlines on it, Dean. You do.
Yeah. So the terms of Broja's deal are that he has to start 60% of the games, or Fulham have to pay a £4 million loan fee. And to reach that criteria, he would have to start 10 matches from when he joined. And Fulham have got 10 matches left. Tomorrow is the first one. So if he doesn't start against Tottenham, we owe Chelsea £4 million, which isn't the end of the world, because Fulham's stance on this is, well, we might owe them £4 million, but I mean, I think this is a bit of an exaggeration, but they think Muniz's value since Broja joined has risen by £20 million. Now, I don't know if they think he was worth zero before he arrived, because I would say Muniz is worth about £20-25 million. But
interesting.
There's no doubt that,
isn't it? A striker scoring goals in the Premier League, the percentage increase once that ball goes in the net just rockets for a young forward scoring goals.
Yeah, and I'll gloss over what happened at Old Trafford quickly, Dean, for obvious reasons. But I was very impressed with him in that game. He didn't return in that match in FPL, but he was a constant threat, and something that United, there's an aspect of Fulham's play that United struggled to deal with, especially in the first half. So I don't know what the value would be that he's added on to his overall value, but I can see that he's become a more expensive asset to buy for other clubs. So Broja's not actually made a start yet then?
No, he hasn't made a start yet.
It's a push to think that he's going to start. I would say, without knowing the intricacies of the details, I think it's a push to think that he's going to start every single game for the rest of the season, based on the fact he's not started one yet. So
100%, like that's not going to happen, is it? Like there's no,
not with his injury record. Even if he was flying, like Broja's starting 10 games consecutively, he's just never fit.
So I'd be confident then that Muniz starts this weekend based on that.
I don't think. I mean, you could read it two ways. You'd be like, right, well, on one side of it, you could be like, well, at least if they start him in this one, they've started him for one game, and it opens the door to see how things pan out from there. But Muniz has been good, and I think it would be a bit of a risk to upset him at this stage. At the end of the day, Muniz is a Fulham player and Broja is a Chelsea player, and you want to look after your own players first and foremost. And if the value of those players can rise, then that's where you are better off being. So I would say that the likelihood is that Muniz does still start. The only other slight doubt here for me is that Muniz didn't have his greatest game last time out at Wolves, and Broja did come on, and Broja did have a hand in the goal that Fulham scored right at the end. So just because of how that match ended, I'd say the door has opened a little bit, and that Broja's obviously a good player, and you could easily put him in the starting lineup against Tottenham and bring Muniz on. But I'd be extremely harsh on Muniz to suddenly drop him out of the team. Now, I think you've both frozen at the moment, so I'm guessing, I don't know if you can even hear me. You can hear me. Okay, your video's frozen at the moment.
I'm going to get rid of YouTube, so I won't be able to see any comments, but that's fine. Hopefully that's fine. The bandwidth.
Yeah. Close up your close that, and we'll see if your picture comes back. But I think you're right. Like, if take a punt on Muniz, but it is know that it is a slight punt, and it's not a guaranteed start. But even if he was to come on in this game, because he's only going to come on Fulham are chasing a goal, and if he's left on the bench and he's got that bit between his teeth and the way that he's been playing, I'd still probably fancy him to score anyway if Fulham were going to get a goal out of the game. So I don't even think that would be the worst thing.
And what about Spurs, Ian? Like that, we know Fulham are good. We know there's options there, but most free hit drafts, we're not seeing many Fulham players, if any. We're seeing triple Spurs on 90% of them. Are you going triple Spurs?
Probably, yeah. But it's whether I triple up on the attack or whether I include a defender in there. I mean, we're going to see our drafts shortly. Full disclosure, this won't be my team. I'm just picking a draft of random alternatives that I thought would be nice discussion points for us, because I think a key part of this free hit has become the fact that the template is so set. I mean, we've done the show this morning there, and you and the other two guests, which were FPL Harry and Zoff from The Wire, the team was very, very similar. There was almost one or two discussion points out of 11 players. So I think finding alternatives, bearing in mind, this is just for 1 week. This is just going against certain popular picks for 90 minutes, recognizing aspects of the games that might suit individual players, individual matchups in the 90 minutes. It can be easier to pick alternatives when it's just single games like this than it is going against a popular pick over a 6, 7, 8 week. game week spell. So, I do think potentially not going Porro and going for Udogie is an option in that Spurs defence. I know Harry was talking about the idea of even going with Romero, who's got more goals and more bonus points this season than Pedro Porro. And the other alternative is looking at a Brennan Johnson in midfield. You could even do that. I'm not sure about James Maddison. Again, full disclosure, we'll see the teams in a moment, but okay, he had a great score last week, and Ange Postecoglou's spoken about the idea of him playing further forward, but has he been that good since his return from injury that he's an absolute must in your team for this week? Brennan Johnson has got 3 returns in the last 4 weeks, I think, something like that, and looks a threat every time he plays. Madison's more nailed, more likely to play 90 minutes, but yeah, I think there are alternatives that you could look at and consider. Depends on your appetite to risk, depends on your appetite to try and chase rank, depending on where you are. In my sort of position, 300,000 or whatever I am, I'm more tempted to take risks. If I'm in the top 100,000 or even higher, perhaps you should play it safer. But there's definitely people you could pick that can go against the popular ones and try and hedge your bets a little bit there.
Yeah, I'm actually interested to see your team because, as G will know, I did my free hit team last Sunday, just like laying in bed at night, couldn't sleep. I was like, I'm just going to play around with my team and have a free hit. And I hadn't seen anybody's free hit at that stage. And I did it, and I was like, yeah, it looks all right. And then I started to look at a couple of early drafts of free hits, and it was like 80% the same. And I thought I'd been a bit different at that point. Yeah. So the team that I've got is at the moment is still that team from Sunday, but I'm at 800k. There's no way I can go with a free hit team that is the same as everybody else's free hit team because it makes it completely pointless. And so I'll be interested to see your alternates because I need to draft a few in.
Mind you, though, Dean, actually playing the free hit and having the template is a differential this week because, we're talking about this being a very popular free hit week, but I think there's only about 700,000 players at the moment who've hit free hit. That will grow.
Is there? Okay.
For the deadline, but even if it gets to 1 million, that's still only 10% of the game playing free hit. So, I'm saying the same. I'm saying if I'm chasing a little bit, I want to find some alternatives. But there's no way I'm going 11 players different. There's no chance of that. It might just be 1 or 2 here and there because it is a differential having you free hit and play. The stats show that. There'll be a lot of coverage of the popular assets from non-free hitters, but yeah, having even the template free hit will be different to the majority of the game.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize there was that few people actually free hitting. British says, why does Stockley Park always have awful Wi-Fi? Probably doesn't. It's probably just not meant as a place for streaming when it's a huge place, isn't it?
Yeah, I reckon being on the edge of the building doesn't help us either. Like we're sat by the window here, good lighting, we hope, but maybe those routers are in the middle of the building. I don't know.
It's not like Gianni to prioritise the good lighting over a good Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah, it's also funny, I should throw it out there. We're really close to the Premier League trophy. Shame I can't show you guys. But yeah, I mean, if we go back to those 4 fixtures and we're trying to think of differentials, we're trying to think of upside, forget clean sheet points. Which game has the most goals? And if you think you know the answer to that, or you want to punt on a fixture, invest in the team or the teams playing in that fixture. So for me, like I look at Luton and Forest and go, this is a game where I wouldn't be surprised to see 5+ goals. In all the others, I'd probably be surprised with 5+ goals. With Luton Forest, I really don't think I would. And I don't know where those goals come from. I think it's probably both teams. But with that in mind, it's okay, back attackers from both teams. Do you guys have like any strong opinions? Ian, I'll come to you first on a game which could have goals and players within that fixture you like. West Ham Villa, for example, for me is a game I definitely cannot predict and I struggle with, and I'm probably going to go light in that fixture because it could be a low scoring tight affair.
Yeah, I think they're all difficult to predict in a way. Brentford Burnley's probably the most nailed on to be a victory one way or the other. I guess Spurs Fulham as well is a more favourable matchup, but it's not exactly a home banker or an away banker, depending on which way you sort of terminate. Forest, for me, are the team that obviously attack-wise are being invested in based on the goals that were scored the other night. And actually, you and I, looking at some of the stats before the show earlier, maybe undid this point a little bit. But I felt like the Forest defence actually was being overlooked a little bit, because the data was showing that in terms of expected goals conceded, they've been pretty strong in recent weeks. but Luton are so attacking and they're so unpredictable. But then I interviewed Neco Williams at the training ground on Wednesday, and he was just so clear about the fact that they'd been preparing to face Luton, the specifics of the game. And a lot's been said about it being a huge game for Luton because they've got Forest 3 points above them and we're within striking distance. If they win, they go, on the same points. But I also think it's a huge game for Nottingham Forest as well. They've got obviously the uncertainty of a potential points deduction coming, depending on how that goes. And the outcome of an appeal or whatever else the proceedings end up being with them. And they are literally one result away from dropping right in to the relegation fight. And they're in it already. They openly admit that. So they've had a clear week to prepare, a very specific set of instructions it sounded like they were going to receive from the manager Nuno, who over time in the Premier League has had form for being able to put together these winning formulas in one-off games. And obviously, Luton have had, a week they're not used to. They've had they will have 3 matches by the end of the week, and that's not normal for them. So they've got injuries in defence as well. I just wonder whether the Forest defence might be an option for us, a Sells in goal, or even a Neco Williams who has just won Player of the Month as well for Forest. Whether that's an option for us potentially, but. Yeah, again, it's difficult. We'll come to it, but it's difficult to create narratives and arguments against some of the popular picks because the template is so set this week, and there's a clear reason for that. But then, like Bobby's saying in the chat, look at Zabani last week. There was absolutely no sign that he was going to end up scoring. I think he'd only scored like 3 goals in his entire career to that point, and his XG combined for the entire season from 26 appearances was about 0.5, and then goal. So, like I say, in one-off games, you never know.
Loads of Flecken in goal, Dean, and in the chat, like CH is saying, what about Flecken? Chai is in the chat. Shout out to Chai. He's just got to 100 in the world. So Well played, Chai. You were at 300 and then wild carded, and amazing wild card. Dean, what do you think with goalkeepers? Like, there's a few looking at Leno and Martinez. Maybe Kaminsky for save points. You could argue Sells is going to be busy. It's so hard predicting clean sheet points, but many are going towards Flecken. That will give many teams a double up in Brentford defence because Reguilon is a very template pick. So is that too much? Like, would you look at Brentford and think you want to go double defence there? Because I'm put off from Flecken partly because I'm going Reguilon.
Yeah, I saw a stat that Brentford have conceded 17 headed goals in the Premier League this season, and that's more than any other team. And I think of like if Burnley are going to score, like how's it going to come about? And I'm like, well, that doesn't fill me with confidence because it might be set piece or something that Burnley managed to score from. But it's tough because at the moment I've got the Luton goalkeeper and I don't think they'll keep a clean sheet. That's the problem with it. I don't know why I've picked him, to be honest, because I do not think Luton have got a clean sheet in them. They've lost 6 of their last 8 Premier League home games. They look so good going forward. Like some of the ways that they undone Bournemouth the other day was outstanding. Like they were devastating sometimes with some of their breakaway play. But going the other way, they're useless. They just cannot keep the ball away from their goal. And because this game does mean so much to Nottingham Forest, I do find it kind of impossible to believe that they don't score a goal. Even if they're 2-0 down and they're pressing on in the late stages and they manage to get 1 back, it's like that sort of feeling if they don't even go on and win the game. So I don't know, man. I don't know if any of these teams keep a clean sheet. That's probably the worst thing about it. Like, I was really look at what is the most likely clean sheet here.
According to the bookies,
it's probably Tottenham.
It's Brentford at 27% and Tottenham at like 25%, according to the bookies odds. So no team is rated higher than 29% likely to keep a clean sheet.
Do you know what that makes me think I'd do though? It's just pick Areola, because it just covers the fact that there's is he about 35%, 36% owned, something like that. So just covering the fact that he's a very popular keeper that a lot of non-free hitters will have. And protects you a little bit, maybe that's a tactic to try and not leave yourself susceptible to non-free hitters, and just match up there and hope that the players that you've picked elsewhere give you the advantage, because Areola's got it in him, as we've seen in recent weeks, even without a clean sheet, to get really high scores. I mean, granted, that was a penalty save at Everton, which ensured that, but he does make a lot of saves, and it's a game which could have goals in it, but it's also a game that could be tight, that one. If Ollie Watkins isn't fit and available, that's a huge blow to Villa. That's a big part of their defence missing. I know in the chat before, someone said they were at the Villa game last night, and John Duran, when he came on, looked brilliant. But it definitely weakens Villa not having Watkins there. So there you go. It's Rich who mentioned it. I definitely think Leon Bailey's an interesting option. But again, if Watkins isn't there, does that weaken Leon Bailey?
The combination between Bailey and Watkins has been so good. They've played as a front two. Last night was really interesting that Diaby came into the 11. And with that, Bailey was forced wide, and it was Diaby and Watkins down the middle. So I do wonder where Bailey starts if Diaby features this weekend. The fixtures that we're saying might be low scoring. If we're looking at a tighter game that we can't predict, many of us are pointing to that West Ham Villa game. It's also worth noting with bonus points and goalkeepers, you're competing with your teammates for bonus points. So if you're a goalkeeper and you're in a fixture which has got 7-8 goals, you're never going to get bonus, even if you've made 10 saves, because there's forwards that have scored goals, there's midfielders that score goals. In the Aston Villa versus West Ham game, if it's tight, even if it's 1-1, you've got a good chance of bonus points from Areola if he's involved, because there's not loads of other players on the pitch picking up those extra points.
Yeah, I think...
more I think about it, Dean, what do you think? Goalkeepers and Areola?
Don't even want a goalkeeper after that conversation. Doesn't even matter, does it? They're all going to concede goals.
Go with Leno, mate. Go with your heart.
Yeah, let's sing super burnt Leno in goal. I don't see Fulham keeping a clean sheet. If I was gonna pick one right now, then I'm sticking with Luton. I'm sticking
with Luton. Kaminsky.
Yeah.
I just saw a moment ago that West Ham have got Leverkusen in the Europa League.
That is brutal. That is brutal.
Right.
That'd be a game.
That'd be a great
coefficient vibes all over that game as well, isn't there? With obviously the Premier League chasing a fifth spot in the Champions League for next season. It's England versus Germany. It looks like for that at the moment, doesn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a big game that on.
Yeah, and then they face Leverkusen. Yeah, wow.
And Milan have got Marseille, but I think they can meet Roma by the way the draw's gone for FPL Freddie. So yeah, shout out Freddie for that. Yeah, it's just final point then on goalkeepers. I think we need to also consider the team. So Leno is a great example of this. We don't think Leno will keep a clean sheet. You might go, he's going to be busy. But what do Spurs do? Spurs don't create a ton of chances, but the chances they create are quite big chances. So what we're looking for is goalkeepers that are facing teams that create lots of chances, but lower XG. And I hate to come back to him because I don't think I'm going to go there. Flecken faces a Burnley team that create quite a lot of chances and they're often quite low XG chances. So he could rack up the save points. I just don't rate him as a keeper to actually make lots of saves.
Well, again, we did a bit of research before the show earlier, and statistically he's the worst goalkeeper in the Premier League of the ones who have played regularly this season. I think there's 26 different goalkeepers and he has got, was it -7?
Yeah,
says something like that in terms of the number of goals that he's conceded. Versus the expectation of the number of goals that he'd concede. So the quality of chances and shots that he's faced, he'd be expected to have conceded 7 fewer goals this season, and that's the worst rating in the Premier League. So that is really against his performance against Manchester City a few weeks ago when he faced something like 12 shots in the first half of that game at home. I kind of think I'm going to play it safe and go with Areola.
Yeah, I must admit, knowing Villa don't have McGinn, with Kamara out, Douglas Luiz is going to be in midfield very, very deep. That lessens the goal threat.
There might be no Watkins or it might not be
100%.
Yeah. Villa are a weird one at the moment, aren't they? I don't. It depends. Emery can overcomplicate things as well. So, yeah, difficult to know exactly what you're going to get from Aston Villa, but they have just beaten Ajax 4-0, so silly to doubt them, maybe.
Yeah. Both West Ham and Villa, the only two teams in action on the Thursday, play each other on the Sunday, which is a shame. I was hoping for matchups versus fresher teams, but maybe we look at that with Forest, as you said earlier, Ian, like Luton have 3 games in a week, Forest a whole week on the training ground, Nuno disciplined. There's a small edge there each time.
We frozen again because they're laughing at my frozen.
Yeah, and you're like, you're really like staring into G's eyes as well, Ian. So it's a beautiful moment in time that we've all got on our screens right now.
It's just what's really happening. The screen's frozen. My goodness.
Yeah. Well, what is a good time to do is Yeah, let's put our teams on the screen, and then we haven't. Then it might
smaller.
spark
In
things
my
into
face.
life, and we've got something else for people to look at. Oh, you're back. You're back as soon as the teams came on. Okay.
Kick us off then, Dean.
Yeah. So here's my free hit as it stood on Sunday night. Obviously, Watkins will not be in it any longer.
Will he not?
Kaminsky.
Why won't you go Watkins? Because if he's fit, well, there's a chance he starts. He won't come off the bench, so you may as well put him in and just have a good first sub. No.
I guess so, yeah. That's true, actually, because I have actually got, I haven't got it on here. I've still got loads of money. So you're actually right. I don't need to get rid of Watkins. I've got about 7 million still that I could spend on this team if I wanted.
Well, Dean, I think it's a really key thing for free hitters. I think that gives us a real advantage this week that you can start Ollie Watkins and have a really good backup for him that if he doesn't play, can come in, because non-free hitters will have Ollie Watkins in place. You know, he is one of the cornerstones of non-free hit 29 teams. He's one of the cornerstones of free hit 29 teams as well, but he's certainly a player that all the non-free hitters will have had in place for this week, and they'll have no backup because the players that they have in backup won't have a fixture this week. So I definitely have him in the depending on what Unai Emery says in his press conference. As it stands at the moment, if he's got a chance, I'd have him in the starting lineup with a really good backup to come in if he doesn't play.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, what I've kind of done here, I mean, I don't like the amount of players and spread I've got across the West Ham Villa game particularly. But away from that, I've kind of gone with one side of the conversation at the moment. So like the Tottenham Fulham fixture, just got Tottenham players. The Luton Nottingham Forest game, like just going to be starting Luton players as it stands right now. And this is, I don't know if this is really, really stupid, or if this is going to work to my favour. Because on the flip of this, I really did consider just covering my bases, and of the 8 teams, just making sure I've got one good asset from each team. That was one other approach I was taking. You two are more experienced than me in terms of knowing whether that would be a good idea or not. But that was part of the reason I ended up with this draft in the first place. And then, as I say, I started to look at other people's teams, and honestly, 80% of this team is just what everybody else is doing.
Yeah, I think it's the right approach. You try and pick your battles, so you're identifying games where there's lots of goals, which is what I'm doing. I'm going big on Luton and Forest. Or you identify games in which you go, yeah, I think West Ham will score a couple, so I'm going to go Bowen and Kudus, for example. So I think it's the right approach. You're going big on Spurs and none on Luton because you think Spurs win. So I think it's the right shout. But let's just go to your West Ham midfielders. I want to ask you about these two, because Kudus is getting quite a lot of love, especially off the back of a brilliant goal last night. Double West Ham midfield, though, means you're relying on West Ham to score, but, in an ideal world, a few. Do you see that in the Premier League against Villa? Because Villa defensively, I always think, can turn up. I think they can shut anyone out on their day.
Well, they can, but they could also go the other way because they're so flaky at the moment, aren't they? And this is the problem with this fixture. Like both teams, you really don't know what you're getting. I mean, Moyes was about to get sacked a few weeks ago, and the West Ham fans couldn't bear to see his face any longer. And suddenly he starts to play more front-footed football, and they're like, okay, like if he does that, fine. The big problem with Moyes is that so much of this season has been negative, and at this stage, what is the point of him reverting to that style of football right now if that's what had him under pressure in the first place? We have seen firsthand that when he lets players off the leash a little bit, when he lets these players exert themselves a bit more, they're much, much better. So that's my thinking behind having Bowen and Kudus in my team for this week. I just feel like over the last few weeks, we've started to see West Ham just be able to flourish a little bit more. And it's going to be one of these two teams. You look across their results. They scored 4 goals against Brentford. They got 3 goals at Everton, 2 against Burnley, 5 last night. Like they are actually in the goals at the moment. And these are the 2 guys you're looking at. Apparently, Antonio, I didn't watch all of the West Ham game, but a mate of mine was at the game and he was saying Antonio did well as well, but I'm not brave enough to go there. So I'm kind of covering with this one, knowing that I expect one of them to bang, and I don't know which one it's going to be. But seeing as I can have both, I might as well have both.
That's the tactic as well, Johnny, right? So you pick the 2 most popular West Ham midfielders, because if you think they're going to get a goal or 2, you're basically hedging your bets that you're going to have coverage there of some description. You might go with 3 Spurs midfielders in Son, Maddison and Brennan Johnson, not because you think Spurs are going to hit 4 at Fulham, but because if Spurs score at all, you're basically guaranteeing
Something.
coverage, aren't you? So
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like it's going to be a massively high scoring week. I think, you know, the top, well, the average score is going to be what, 35-ish, maybe something like that, possibly pushing 40. If you're on free hit, obviously you'd be hoping to get 15 to 20 at least higher than the average. Picking like 3 Spurs midfielders and guaranteeing you some returns if Spurs are in the goals is another way of playing this free hit, and not just picking individual players that you think are the best coverage, but just blanket covering it and guaranteeing you something. I've seen a lot of people doing that. It's an interesting tactic that I've not considered before this free hit, to be fair.
Because Dean, you mentioned earlier about needing some differentials to be different at 800k, but actually you might do that alone through captaincy, because the world and their dog are going to captain Son, because Son pulled last week. He is a very good pick, sure, and we identify that fixture as good, but Tony's got the better fixture here. Like, Son, sure, has got the form, but I'm 60-40 on it. I'll probably end up on Son, and that's partly due to my rank, and I'm being cautious because I don't need to play with high risk. But at your rank, I think you're making the absolute right decision here, and I think that's a really fun captaincy choice in Tony.
Yeah, look, typically Fulham actually do all right against Son. They don't do well against Tottenham. Tottenham always come to Craven Cottage in the Premier League and win. So that's another reason I expect Tottenham to go and win this game. But Son, I think he's only scored 1 goal against us. So that's one of the reasons I'm not captaining him. 2, I don't want to be at a game when Son, there's part of me that's like, yes, when Son sticks in his hat-trick. But also, like, Ivan Toney, mate, I genuinely, like, have really enjoyed watching this guy, like, prove that he is who we were led to believe he is. Like, when he was out for all of that time with his ban, he was coming back, and all that time I was thinking, is even Ivan Toney really this good? Like, is he really worth a 60, 70, 80 million pound transfer? Is he worth being in the England squad? And every week I watch him and think, yeah, he's absolutely outrageous, actually. He's absolutely brilliant. And Burnley can be shocking. And Ivan Toney will absolutely prey on them if they show any weakness this weekend. And given that he's back in that England setup too, and will want to, like, a bit of strut about him, walking out this weekend. He's an England player. He wants to go into there full of confidence, go into that England camp, because he won't just want to be in the squad. He'll want some minutes in those England fixtures. And by going into a game of any team, you're facing Burnley, you want to score a couple of goals in that match. So I'm reasonably happy, to be honest, with that fixture. If it was Son at home to Fulham, then I would be captaining Son. But, Fulham, we're not terrible. And actually, our centre-backs have been very good. Bassi and Tosin is actually a very good central defensive partnership. So I'm hoping that Son doesn't score more than 1 and this works out for me.
Yeah, the Tony motivation thing is interesting. I remember covering the Brentford game at Manchester City before the World Cup in 2022. So it was the last fixture before everyone went away, and Tony scored twice in a win for Brentford at the Etihad. And after the game, pretty much called out Gareth Southgate for not picking him in the squad. There's obviously controversy around the incoming ban and stuff like that at the time as well. But obviously he took that very personally. And I think it's interesting that he gets in the squad this time. He's got a fight in his hands potentially to make the squad for the Euros in the summer. He felt so wounded about missing out on that World Cup that surely he's going to be absolutely full of motivation to show that he definitely deserves to be in that Euros team, the Euros squad. And if there is some doubt over Watkins' fitness as well, does that push Tony up the pecking order even more? And he's looking to grasp his point. We're building a narrative a little bit. We are sort of extrapolating it as much as we can, but we can see any chances. Tony's there.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a Burnley team that are winless in their last 10 Premier League games. So, like, you've got to believe that a striker of his credentials is going to be able to take advantage of a team that are absolute wounded animal at the moment and have got no real belief that they've got any hope of staying in this division or perhaps even getting another win under their belt. So, yeah, I'm reasonably confident in that one.
They play good football, Burnley. Like, they'll have a go, and Tony's going to get chances. Like, I could see Burnley actually probably having the greater share of possession, but
that goes against them sometimes. I remember that I think it was at the Etihad when they tried to play a bit, and it really didn't work for them. I know nothing ever works for Burnley actually when they go to Man City, but
work for anyone when they go to Man City.
No, but I just felt that it was like, I appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I've seen him do it a few times, and it just doesn't work out for them. Every now and then, I mean, the last win they had was actually against Fulham, and I was at the game, and they caught me by surprise in the fact that they managed to dominate so much of the ball, and they're actually one of the best sides I've seen come to Craven Cottage this season. That's 10 games ago, and they haven't won a game since, and so then you start to think, okay, it was just a one-off, and that is actually not who you are.
There's some little things out there in the FPL community. We will joke that see increased performances. We see new contract bounce. We see new manager bounce. We see new haircut bounce.
Had a new boot bounce.
That was me with Darwin. New Predators he was wearing. But with Tony, it's his birthday. New birthday bounce and maybe England squad bounce. So we can set the narrative how we want, but a little bit of fun. New baby on the way bounce. There's another one. I like the look of the team. I'm glad you're going Tony captain.
I might go Tony captain.
Really? Yeah.
Just having that discussion there, sort of beginning to talk myself into it. Really.
Yeah, I like the shout very, very much. I think this is I can't see Fulham getting battered. I could see a world in which Burnley get battered. So yeah, let's have a look at the either Ian's or mine up next. Ian's put together a load of players to consider thinking about differentials. I've got a very template looking team, so it's good to compare the two. Remember Alvarez's birthday? Yeah, I think we saw goals there, did we?
You, mate.
Oh, I have got Flecken in this version.
How boring that is.
It's just so boring. It's so templatey. I texted this to the producer of the FPL show last night.
He fell asleep.
This image. He said,
didn't get to the end of the text.
I'm so sorry. It's so template and so boring. He was like, no, don't. It picks itself this week. And I do feel like that's how a lot of content creators have landed. Even those that like to look outside the box are struggling. It won't be Flecken. I've spoken my way out of Flecken this morning, chatting with the guys here at Premier League Productions, speaking with you guys now. Like, it'll be Emi Martinez or Areola. I think that'll be the two I'm decide between. But the rest of the team, the rest of the squad, I think is locked. It just comes down to who's in the 11. So the big question for me is, do I go with double Nottingham Forest attack and drop Morris out and therefore have Elanga and Gibbs-White? Or do I keep Morris in and maybe start Elanga instead of Gibbs-White? The more and more I look at Forest and I listen to Forest fans, and I've read some fan forums this morning, I do think Elanga will start. And if we hear he's starting, he's going to be in my team. And if I'm confident he starts, he'll be in. So then it's Gibbs-White or Morris. And at the moment, I think it'll be Morris, just for the fact that I like the fact that Forest are weak defensively from set pieces. We were looking at some data this morning, and the Doherty-Morris combo is a really good one this week. Dean, what's your take? A bit boring, but all the main bases covered.
Well, you've got to protect yourself because you're a content creator. So that's the problem that you've got. And if you were to be too outrageous here, people will wonder what on earth you're doing. And yeah, you're protecting a chip. So I understand it. And look, half of my team is the same as this anyway. So like, there's only so many spots that you can actually change up. There's really 3 positions that you would even be tempted to change here to be a little bit different. But yeah, the goalkeeper, I think is fine to change. Morris would be too much of a risk to not have in this game week, I would say. I'd probably go with it, to be honest. If I was you, apart from the goalkeeper, I think I'd stick with the outfield team.
Yeah. Yeah, we get Gio Batty in quite regularly, who is often blocked, and me and Dean have always had some comments as well.
Hello, Gio. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
If I knew who was playing in certain positions in certain games, it would give me a lot more confidence to go with some of the different shouts as well. Yeah. And again, we'll talk about it in a little while when we have a look at the different players that I've picked. But, if you knew who was playing on the right-hand side for Nottingham Forest, for example, when you see how good a match Semenyo had the other night with the issues that Luton have got in defence down that side, if you knew that Elanga was starting there, or you knew that Hudson-Odoi was starting there, maybe that is a way to differentiate yourself. But it's difficult to know. If you knew who was starting up front, Luton conceded a lot of chances through the middle. But you could pick Chris Wood and a 1 year starts, or you could pick a 1 year and Wood starts, and you don't really want to be doing that on your free hit either, do you? You want to be making sure that you are pressing home your advantage. So that's another reason why this team has become very template because you were almost guaranteeing that all those players are starting. And not only that, Bowen, Gibbs-White, Maddison, Morris, they're all 90-minute players, and that's obviously Son and Watkins and Tony are givens for that. So you're looking to differentiate it and you're only getting 60 minutes of a 90-minute game week, then, you're having 2/3 of the opportunity to score against someone who's getting the full game. So I can see why this template has been established very firmly this week, but that's why it's fun trying to pick holes in it.
A week ago, I wasn't going to go Morris, and then I saw Luton score 3 goals at Bournemouth, but I also saw that Adebayo didn't feature, and I kind of expected Adebayo to be back around fit and available come game week 29. And when Adebayo's in the team, 1, Morris doesn't play as the out-and-out number 9, but 2, Morris's minutes are a little bit more limited. With no Adebayo, and he wasn't in the squad versus Bournemouth, so even if he's in the squad this weekend, he won't be starting. Morris, again, is safe for 90, because I was looking at Visser, again, a player that isn't going to get 90, but he probably will start, and 70 minutes of Visser against Burnley, I thought, comes with a nice differential punt. But now that punt is out the window, knowing Morris is absolutely nailed. But if you are looking for a forward that's not one of these 3 on screen, I would go Visser just because, again, I think the upside is there. He had a brilliant AFCON for the DRC. Democratic Republic of Congo do not get to knockout stages of AFCON. They did. Visser was instrumental in that run. And then he came back to Brentford and got in the 11. And that, again, that's not always been the case. And he's been scoring goals. So I like Visser if you want to go a little bit outside the box this week. He might feature actually in on your differential list. So let's have a look at that.
He does, yeah.
Thought he might.
Well, he's high up, isn't he? We had the stats on the show earlier on about the attacking data. So the metric was expected goal involvement over the last 6 game weeks, sorted per 90 minutes played. And Visser was really high on that list, wasn't he? Whereas Tony didn't even make the top 6, which our producer Fitz was sort of saying, well, actually, if you look at the teams that Brentford have played in recent weeks, then it's very difficult matches. But then again, Visser's played exactly the same. Yeah. So in that sense, maybe this is the one to be pushing towards rather than Tony. Can we get the team up maybe and have a look at it?
Yeah, we'll have a look at Ian's differentials that he's picked. This just clarifies isn't 100% your team, but you are going to be picking some of these guys in your team.
Well, these are the considerations to go against some of the popular picks. We ignore captaincy and vice captaincy. That just doesn't matter. So Sells as an option to go against Flecken and Areola. Like I say, since I've put this together last night, I'm probably looking more towards Areola. But I think just got a feeling that Forest might do all right, like I mentioned earlier on. If Reguilon's not fit, which he is yellow flagged at the moment, although he has been pictured back in training, then I think that there is, the option to go elsewhere, because I still think it's worth having some ownership and some coverage of Brentford. Yeah. Obviously, Ruslev is the alternative if they play wing backs. Collins, I think, is a threat from set pieces against his old team in Burnley as well. Another one of the sort of mystical FPL things we talk about is the idea of a player coming up against his old club and doing well. Udogie, I think I spoke about earlier on, as an alternative to Porro. So I think that is maybe somewhere. I think with Porro, people who have Porro will have had him for a very long time. And the big reason why we invested in Porro is because when James Maddison in particular was missing, he was someone who we thought was going to be on set pieces. He seemed like he was playing further forward inside, picking up some of the creative role in that Spurs team. And since they've had Maddison and others back, it feels like he's dropped back a lot more. And actually, Udogie's been getting further forward on the other side. Into midfield, Johnson's the alternative, I think, to Maddison, or an addition to Maddison and Son if you want to go strong on the Spurs attack and cover it. I'm not saying that I think Spurs will get 4 at Fulham, Dean, but I do think there's potential there for them to get a couple, and Johnson's form of late has been good. Hudson-Odoi, I have no idea whether he's going to start or not, but if you're going to take a gamble against the more popular Elanga or Gibbs-White, he has shown form at times in certain matches this season. And if you could guarantee me that he's starting on the right-hand side for Nottingham Forest against Luton, I think a lot more strongly about him. I think Leon Bailey's just been overlooked as well.
He is, yeah.
I think, his form across the season has been really, really strong. He's only 5.7 million, so maybe that's a reason why people haven't taken him fully seriously at times. But I think he's an interesting alternative or addition to Ollie Watkins or Douglas Luiz in midfield for Villa. Paquetá we've spoken about. I think his goal involvement is pretty high from an assist perspective, maybe not from a goal scoring perspective. But if you think Villa are playing a high line and they need someone to pick the passes over the top to the players running through, Paquetá's your man. Up front, Duran, because we don't know about Watkins' fitness. And like someone said earlier, you know, he had a pretty strong performance off the bench against Ajax in the week. Vissa, for the reasons Gianni said before, and a 1 year Allwood, whoever you think is going to be up front, I think, against a Luton side who've conceded a lot of goals. If you knew who was starting up front for Forest, I think that's a pretty strong pick. I'd maybe even go for a Forest forward ahead of a Forest midfielder if I knew for definite that player was starting, which we can't always know.
I would as well. Like, for someone that wants to back Forest big, and I've got two of my 8 attackers are Forest players. I would much rather have an Awani than a Gibbs White. It's just the minutes guarantee that comes with, say, a Gibbs White. So this one might come down to the wire. Also, I guess it's worth noting with forward spots, if we've all got Watkins and Morris and Tony, which one drops out? Midfield, there feels like there's a little less competition in terms of space available. And it's picking between, say, a West Ham midfielder like Kudus or Paqueta, or a Forest mid like Hudson-Odoi, Elanga or Gibbs White. Tough one. Dean, what do you make of this? Like, you're looking for some inspiration in terms of differentials. Any of these caught your eye? Like you mentioned Bailey there. It will be 3 starts in a week for Bailey, but he came off, I think, after an hour at the weekend, just after an hour again last night. So he should be fine for a start on Sunday. Just doesn't come with a 90-minute appeal.
No, it doesn't have the 90-minute appeal, but he has form, and he has a style of play that could absolutely expose West Ham. You know, going backwards, you know, that area of the pitch, like West Ham have been exposed again and again in exactly the position that Leon Bailey picks up. So that is something that I would have on my radar as to why I think he could do well. You know, recently there have been a few times when he's had decent points hauls, obviously against Nottingham Forest, where they beat them 4-2 at home. But there's also when he went to Sheffield United away, scored in that game as well. And yeah, I think he's a good pick, Bailey, and especially on the back of last night, at a time when Watkins might not be playing as well. Like, what I'll possibly be tempted to do is have Bailey in even as the Watkins replacement. I don't think it matters for Bailey whether Watkins plays or not. I'm tempted that I might bring Bailey in and have him on the bench, and if Watkins doesn't play that game, that Bailey does. But I'll wait and see. I'll have a proper look at mine later. But he's going to start that game. Like Mark says, Villa have no choice but to start Bailey. Squad's starting to look threadbare. And that's the thing. And he's spent his whole career wanting to be this person that he's finally becoming. Like, he's thrown his toys out the pram on 2, 3, 4 occasions, not just at Villa, but at clubs previously too, because he does have an ego about him. And that's because he genuinely believes that he's a big deal in his own mind, and he thinks he should be in the minds of other people too. And I think that he is actually starting to live up to his own hype now. And I'm starting to feel like, fair enough, mate, because it's hard when you build yourself up, and, you know, he's put pressure on the manager and managers in the past to play him more. And when he's getting the game time now, he's actually delivering. And I think that he'll see this as a moment that he can't let go.
Yeah, I think I need to spell out again, looking at the chat, that this isn't my free hit draft. This is just a lineup of players, alternatives to the established template that's developed. And you know, look at the ownership on this page. There's a couple who are over 5%, but the majority of them are in and around 1-2% owned. So, you know, you hit someone who does really well this week on your free hit, and that is firing you up the rankings. So that was the whole idea. It blew Mustafa's mind as well when I sent it through to him. He thought I was actually going with this. I'm not going with this. Mark said,
do it, mate. Do it.
I picked Tae Chong out on the FPL podcast as a differential last week, and obviously he got 11 points, I think. So I just think it is worth, and it'd be interesting to know what people think in the chat, where they're going to look to differentiate. We've probably got 2 or 3 spots where we can have a bit of fun, I would say. Maybe 4 or 5 if you've got a stronger appetite to risk. So, yeah, they're the areas that you can sort of attack, I would say.
When you have that one differential as well, like even for those that went Zabani in the week, I think at my rank, Zabani was something like 30% owned. but that was still a differential. Like a lot of the players we own at our rank points might be 40, 50, 60% owned. So for me, like having that Zabani 8 points was huge. You straight away, you go on live FPL and you see your green arrow. Someone like Visser this week, 6.2% at your rank will be similar. Like, I think Visser is a really obvious candidate for the #1 differential outside the template. He's the guy I really want to squeeze in. If I was allowed 4 midfielders and 4 strikers, Visser would be in my squad without doubt. So that would be my top tip of the game week. I'm going to ask Dean and Ian for one of the #1 differential you'd pick out outside of the template team that we've seen. It's kind of my team. Dean, I'll come to you first. One name from you.
Mate, I haven't even talked about it, but I've got Douglas Luiz on my bench, and like, there's part of me that feels like he's going to get a pen and he's going to score. I said the other day, like sometimes when I do a free hit team, I'm just like, get as many set piece takers. If you've got starters and set piece takers in your team, you're just increasing your chances that even if they're having an off day, that moment comes. And Luiz, like Douglas Luiz, has just consistently outperformed what you would expect from him across a game week. Like it's got into double figures quite a few times. And knowing, like, I think I said it as well last week, West Ham are clumsy. You know, Villa can turn that defence inside out. You know, just a moment from Bailey or Duran or Diaby, Watkins, whatever. They have these sharp little movements in the box, one dangling foot, and suddenly it's pen. Douglas Luiz is my differential that I'm going to kick myself if I leave him out of my team in the end. There's probably a chance I do that.
Like that. It'll be interesting to see how deep he is. I expect with no McGinn, he's even deeper. But as you say, the set piece threat is always
it's not about that. Yeah, exactly. It's not about that. Yeah.
I think Leon Bailey, for the reasons that we've talked about, I think he's the one. Although I am nervous that if Ollie Watkins is missing, that does weaken Aston Villa's attack. He's such a focal point of that team that I wonder what. We've not really seen much evidence. Maybe I'll have to have a look back at their Europa League campaign and see Europa Conference League campaign to see if there's any clues in there about how he's done when it's been John Duran up front and not Ollie Watkins. If Watkins is ruled out, I think he's probably my alternate. I think I will go Adogi over Porro as well. That's another one.
I like that. Adogi definitely carries greater goal threat for me. Porro for the assist threat. Guys, thank you for all your suggestions in the chat. If you fancy hitting that like button, that would be amazing. Please do. But also subscribe to Chasing Green Arrows. Loads are tuning in around now thinking it's 1 o'clock. We've done 12:30 on Wednesday. The times are always between 12 and 2. So make sure you're hitting that notification bell so you can't come in and complain, oh no, we're a bit late. But likewise, if you are just joining, go back and watch the last hour. You won't be missing out. You can still contribute in comments to this video outside of the chat. Final note for me is to thank you both. In awesome sitting alongside you doing the stream for the first time. You driving back to Manchester now?
I am, mate. Yeah, nice. I am.
Friday
Weekend off
traffic
for me though.
Oh, no games.
Yeah, weekend off.
Nice.
No Premier League fixture for me. I'll be watching United Liverpool on Sunday for obvious reasons, but no work.
Nice. Dean, what about you? You're off to Craven Cottage. Is that tomorrow, 3 o'clock?
Yeah, no, it's the 5:30 game tomorrow. Yeah, so got my little boys football training in the morning, and then we'll be off to the cottage after that to see if. He says he doesn't even want to go because he says we're not going to win. But that's the optimism of a 6-year-old for you. He said, "Okay, I'll come. I can see Son in real life." I was like, "Cool, let's do that."
I love how the youth of today are supporting individuals as much as teams. Like for him, it's not about watching Spurs; it's about watching Son.
It's about watching.
It's like he can't believe Fulham have still got to play Liverpool at home, Man City at home, and he's excited because it means he sees Salah and Haaland in real life. So I'm like, fine, whatever gets you through, mate. Whatever gets you through.
Yeah, but you'll own him in your FPL team, Dean. So don't pretend that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, true.
Good stuff. Right. Well, me and Dean will be back on Monday. So make sure you're tuning into that. Go back and watch the last hour, as I said, if you are just joining. And CH, I am doing a deadline stream on my channel tomorrow at around midday. So look forward to seeing you on my show. But for now, he's been Dean, he's been Ian, I've been Janny. You lot have been the amazing chasers. Thank you for your comments, and we'll see you on Monday.